Super, we are live.
Yeah, it says that we are live. And yeah, it looks like we are live on YouTube as well. Yeah, let me mute myself on YouTube because that will be double voice. Yeah, we are live. So guys, any topics to discuss?
Yeah, let's discuss VictoriaLogs.
No. That's later. Let's discuss weather.
Okay, the weather is fine today in Walnut Creek.
I have 32 degrees right now.
Sorry?
I'm saying I have 32 degrees right now.
32 degrees? It's too hot.
Yeah, indeed. It is.
I hope you have air conditioning in your room.
No, I have like a strange box which has a pipe, and you need to put that pipe in the window, and then it like do a lot of noises and working like just a fan. But big and bulky. Yeah, so that's all I have.
From my side, we have 29 degrees in Krakow. And I received the emergency alert yesterday. That's like extremely heat. Please be careful. So that's something unusual. And there will be one more day with 29, and after that returns to the really normal temperature, like 20, 22, something like that. Actually, Roman asked me why, because Mount is not far from here, like 1 hour, 1.5 hour driving, and you are in Zakopane, Tatra, something like that. Dima?
Dima?
Yep, it's actually pretty cold here in California. Yes, and we're just as well as everyone in California. 20, 28, 29 in European numbers. Here it's like 60, 68.
That's cool.
We're going to go to Portland, Oregon soon, so that's going to be much better.
Yeah, and I recommend everybody who lives in US to go to Portland on the next on the next week for Monitorama conference, and we will talk about VictoriaLogs on this conference a lot. And you can ask questions, come to our booth and ask questions about it.
Okay. Right now, see no replies in the chat, and we are 1 minute past the beginning. So maybe some people will be there. And I believe we can start in 1 minute.
I think we can start because YouTube records everything, and you can just
okay.
Review it later.
Roman, you go first, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Okay, let's go. I will mute myself.
So I'll check if I can control slides. So welcome everyone to our second meetup in this year. We are trying to be consistent with having these meetups to provide news about what we do in VictoriaMetrics, what are new updates, what is important to know, what company is doing, and also, of course, to get feedback from the community to understand if we are going to the right direction. So welcome everyone. Today's agenda is really like similar to previous. We will have overview of latest features. We will have review of our roadmap for this year. And probably the most hot topic today is VictoriaLogs Preview. And Alexander here will give a small talk about this, show his slides. And also, yes, Alexander said he will be presenting this in Portland next week on Monitorama. So if you have an opportunity to visit this conference, feel free to find him there, ask your questions, and give the feedback. So we start with what's new in Q2. Q2 is, if I'm not mistaken, it's 2 major releases, 90, 91. And let's see what are the most important features from those releases. So first one is that we open sourced Graphite query language support. So this feature was moved from enterprise to open source because we believe like there is a high demand on this feature, and this really makes life of those companies or people who are moving from old-fashioned solutions to the new solutions will make their life easier. Graphite query language is quite cool stuff because basically if you had Graphite before and you used Grafana as a data source and you had all the dashboards, so now you can point write data in Graphite format to VictoriaMetrics and then configure VictoriaMetrics as data source in Grafana for Graphite data source, and everything will continue to work as it was. So one of the public cases of companies who did this is Grammarly.com. So they are using this feature, for example. So I encourage everyone just go and try if you are using Graphite. This support is available from 190. Okay, what else? Another big thing is Windows support. It's also available from 190. You can now run VictoriaMetrics single nodes or cluster components or such tools as VM Backup and VM Restore on Windows, and everything should work correctly. We had like no major issues with it. So yeah, I encourage everyone to try if you were waiting for Windows support. It is now available in open source. Another improvements for vmui, which is user interface for VictoriaMetrics, it now natively supports histograms visualization. So basically, if you just type in query editor that you have a histogram, like just regular query sum rate over histogram bucket, it will automatically plot you a heat map just in vmui. You don't need to like press another some additional buttons. It will work just out of the box. And also we try to keep vmui updated in our playground. So there you can find the latest version of VictoriaMetrics, stable latest version. So you can try all new features of vmui, for example, in our playground. You can find a link to playground on the bottom of the slide. So yeah, visit it, try to play with vmui updates. Another cool feature in vmui right now is relabeling playground. So that's this is a playground where you can test your relabeling rules. So basically, you can paste relabeling rules in one field and example of time series that you need to process with that rules in another field. And this playground will show you step-by-step changes applied to the time series that you pasted. This is extremely helpful when you try to debug something or just to come up with a better labeling rule. So you don't need to run components and try to ingest artificial data and need to try. You can just open vmui and try it there. You can use this playground in your own vmui. You can use this playground in playground from VictoriaMetrics. So yeah, it's pretty handy for us as well. We use it internally, and I'm really thankful that we added this support. Another update with template playground. So we had previously this playground, but it was on a separate URL somewhere, not mentioned in the docs. But right now you have this template playground right in vmui built in. So what it provides you, you can use you can test your with expressions just in browser and see how they will be expanded by VictoriaMetrics on the backend side. So this is also really helpful if you are using with templates, just to verify that everything works correctly here. Okay, what else changed? So we have Cardinality Explorer page, and this page basically helps you to provide an understanding of the most expensive time series in your database. And it provides statistics for selected day. So in the top of the page, you have a time picker, and you selected which day you want to get statistics, like for today. And you get that like this metrics, this metric name, it has like 3,000 time series. And then you can decide if it's okay or if it's too much or not, like just to understand how expensive some metrics in your system are. And with latest updates, vmui now automatically compares the current date to the previous date. So for example, you made some change in your data ingestion today, like dropped some expensive series. And tomorrow you can see the impact of that change, because vmui will automatically compare now with previous day. And you will see if situation got better or even worse. Like for example, suddenly you realize that VictoriaMetrics start to consume more memory, or the number of active time series increased significantly and you don't know why. Just open Cardinality Explorer page and it will show you what changed comparing to yesterday, which is pretty handy. You can also try it on the playground. Okay, what else? There are a lot of improvements to vmauth component. So for example, it now supports filtering by IP. It also supports such features like default route or route for unauthorized users. So you can route them for some, I don't know, some default page where they will be notified about something, or just get an access to non-authorized data source. So yeah, pretty handy. And also vmauth now automatically retries post requests if some of backends failed to respond. So it improves its reliability as well. With enterprise features, we have this Kafka integration for vmagent, and it also got some improvements. So for example, we now support ARM64 for running vmagent along with Kafka. We also can now configure concurrency for consuming data from Kafka. So if you have a lot of CPU cores in your machine with vmagent, you can increase the concurrency to get the better performance, or decrease if it matters. And also vmagent now supports VictoriaMetrics remote write protocol, which saves you network traffic because it applies additional compression, and you can reduce your network costs, especially if Kafka, for example, located in another data center, and vmagent is like you run in separate data centers basically. So yeah, also take a look. Another cool feature. So you see that here on the slide we have alerting rule, which is called too many errors, like the typical alerting rule, which tracks the change per second for metric VM requests error total over 5-minute interval. And this alerting rule is supposed you to notify user if there is a spike in request errors, right? And it could be that there is no errors right now, so you get no alert, right? But when those errors will happen, you expect to receive a notification from Alert Manager and do some actions, right? But when you set up this alerting rule, you don't see any notifications because there is no errors, and everything seems fine. This request returns you like no data right now because there is no errors. Or maybe it returns you no data because you have a typo in the query. So it's quite easy to make a mistake and change letters in the metric name, or just forget to put the right label filter or something like that. And what could happen is that this alert will never fire because you don't have VM request errors total metric at all, because it contains a typo in the name. And Prometheus or VictoriaMetrics can say you about that. They will just return you an empty response. And this empty response is undistinguishable from this situation with typo, or with situation when you don't have the error spike, when everything is okay. So these two situations are equal. But starting from 190, VictoriaMetrics API now returns an additional object in response. And this object called stats. And this object contains a field which called series fetched. And this field shows you how many time series were actually fetched from the data blocks before applying filters like more than 0 or equal to 0, something like that. And this field can say you if your metric name was correct, or the whole time series selector was correct, if all labels were correct. So basically, if you have series fetched more than 0, that means that your inner time series selector is correct, and you actually hit in some time series. They are just then filtered out by some additional comparison operators. And now, with this additional object, some VictoriaMetrics components can say you, can give you a hint if your expression is correct. So, for example, if you execute this expression from the slide with alerting rule in vmui, vmui will show you a notification that this expression has no match, that it receives no series fetched. So series fetched is basically 0 in response. So maybe you have an error in your metric name or time series selector. Also, this feature is supported by vmalert. Right in the user interface of vmalert, it will show you in the yellow rectangle how many alerting rules in your group are matching no series at all. So potentially these rules need to be checked if they are correct, because there is a chance, and really high chance, that these alerting rules just contain a typo and will never fire. And this is very tricky situation when you have alerts that will never fire, because you have a confidence that you are protected from some bad event, and basically you are not, and you will never know about this until someone will say you that bad event happened and you wasn't aware of it. Yeah, so now in vmui, in vmalert user interface, you can filter those rules which match no series, and just check if they are correct. There could be false positives, of course, because it could be that some time series are created only when something happens. So, for example, Argo CD creates some time series when applications not synced, but when everything is synced, those time series just not exist. This is like against of how metrics need to be exposed. Like Prometheus documentation and VictoriaMetrics recommend as well to define all your time series from the very beginning. So they can be set to 0 value, but they need to be exist. But Argo CD doesn't follow this rule, and they have like time series which are created ad hoc in the middle of something. And in Argo CD, you can even find an open issue to fix that, but yeah, it is still not fixed. So yeah, just try. Maybe you have some alerting rules that are not working and you are not aware of it. And also vmalert exposes some additional metrics which could help you to build alerting rules to capture problems with alerting rules or problems with recording rules. On the slide, you have two examples. The first example detects alerting rules which match no time series. And second rule detects recording rules which produce 0 samples. And the second is also very handy, because if you have a recording rule and on each evaluation it produces no samples, that means that this recording rule is like meaningless. It doesn't provide you any data. So maybe you don't need to execute it at all. Okay, so this was like features that I wanted to highlight. If you have any questions about those features, leave a comment in our public channels or on the YouTube translation. We will cover them after, because in the end we will have AMA session where we will respond all the questions that you left. And now let's review the roadmap for 2023 and what changed in it. So you know that we are working on the Grafana data source for VictoriaMetrics, and maybe someone even using it. So for example, we're internally using it. And recently it got some really cool improvement from my perspective, at least. So it got support with templates right in the Grafana data source. So when you can find the issue in the bottom of the slide, you can see more details about it. It's not finished like 100% completely. It's still in progress, but it is already like a really cool, and I will show you how it works. So in the Grafana data source, when you go to VictoriaMetrics type of data source, you now see the full list of dashboards that you have using this data source. And when you open those dashboards, you can put an arbitrary with template expression there. So for example, here for VictoriaMetrics official dashboard, I have a with template expression which defines a common filter, like a variable CF, which contains the common time series filter that is used across the whole dashboard. It's actually used about 80 times across the whole dashboard. And it always filters by job name and by instance. So we define it here only once. And then we have a function called rateBy, which is basically a sum rate function grouped by some label. And it is automatically supports this common filter. It automatically applies it to everything that you use with that function. So you add this with template expression, data source validates it that it is correct. And now you can go to the dashboard itself, and you can replace this expression here for data points ingestion panel, which does this usual sum rate function. You can now replace it with expression, where you can type rateBy by this metric, like VM rows inserted total, and you want to group it by type. And it replaced that bulky expression here. It's not the best example, but sometimes there are really complex calculations, like how much time you have until disk fills up. It's like eight lines of expression, if I'm not mistaken, and it's really hard to read for users. Would be really nice if we can provide this with template expressions along with the dashboard, so users don't need to read complex expression and they can use like really meaningful function names instead. So that's one of the cool features that Grafana data source for VictoriaMetrics gained recently. Yeah, feel free to visit, leave your feedback. It's still not released, so if you have like good suggestions how we can do it better, it is welcomed. Okay, OpenTelemetry. This pull request is still not merged, and actually it is 1 year anniversary for this pull request, and for it to be under development and not merged. Why so? You can ask from Alexander in the end of this meetup in the AMA session. And we can discuss it there. The most important thing of this presentation is VictoriaLogs. So we have it under construction, and today you will see a preview of VictoriaLogs from Alexander. So, word to you, Alexander.
Okay. Today I will talk to you about VictoriaLogs. First, let's meet. If you don't know me, that I'm known as Valjala. It's my nickname across the internet, and I'm CTO and co-developer of VictoriaMetrics. And I was busy with VictoriaLogs for some time, and I'm ready. I'm glad to present you VictoriaMetrics preview and initial impressions about VictoriaMetrics preview today. What is VictoriaLogs? This I would say this database for logs from VictoriaMetrics. It accepts data from existing log shippers such as FileBit, Logstash, FluentBit, and Vector, and support for Promtail and FluentD is on the way. We are going to add this support in coming weeks. VictoriaLogs provides user-friendly query language, which is named LogsQL. This is brand new query language, and it is optimized for user-friendliness. It is very easy to learn, very easy to use, and very easy to read, and it is quite powerful. And our main goal is to replace Elasticsearch and Grafana Loki. So we are going to replace these systems in coming year. Which features VictoriaLogs provides? The first feature is easy to set up and operate. It works out of the box. There is no need to make complex configurations or complex tuning for VictoriaLogs. It just works without any configuration. And it works everywhere, starting from small computers such as Raspberry Pi and finishing with large servers with hundreds of CPU cores and terabytes of memory. And it automatically scales from the small computer to the big computer without the need to change any configuration. It also works in any environments, for instance, Docker, Windows, Kubernetes, Linux, BSD systems, you name it. VictoriaLogs is very easy to maintain. Actually, it requires almost zero maintenance when it runs. And if you use VictoriaMetrics, you already should know what does it mean compared to other products. The next feature is cost efficiency. VictoriaLogs needs much more less memory compared to Elasticsearch. This slide mentions 15 times, but you will see in the benchmark results, which I'll show later, that this number can be even bigger. And VictoriaLogs also uses much less disk space compared to Elasticsearch, up to 15 times less disk space for the same workload for the same data. And it also needs less CPU for processing the same amounts of data compared to Elasticsearch. And of course, it is already mentioned before that VictoriaLogs needs close to zero maintenance, and this means that maintenance costs for VictoriaMetrics, VictoriaLogs, is close to zero. The next feature is VictoriaLogs is fast. Typical queries over logs are executed faster than in Grafana Loki, and also they may be faster than in Elasticsearch. And query performance is in VictoriaLogs is easy to understand and easy to tune. There is no hidden automatic optimizations for queries, and it is very easy to optimize queries for VictoriaLogs if they work slowly. You can read performance tips by this link, and I will show one example how to tune performance for query later in the slides. And query performance in VictoriaLogs scales linearly with the number of available CPU core. This means that if you run VictoriaLogs on a single CPU core machine, then the query is executed, for instance, in 10 seconds. And if you migrate to machine with 10 CPU cores, then it is likely that the query execution time will be reduced by 10 times, from 10 seconds to 1 second. Of course, if the bottleneck is CPU and not disk I/O. The next feature is VictoriaLogs provides user-friendly query language, which is named LogSQL. It is simple yet powerful. It supports full text search across all the log fields, ingested log fields. And by the way, VictoriaLogs supports structured logging from the start, from the beginning. As I mentioned before, it already can read data, can accept data from popular log collectors. LogSQL is much easier to use compared to a LogQL from Grafana Loki. The naming is quite confusing. You see that our query language is named LogsQL, and query language from Grafana Loki is named LogQL. But this doesn't mean that these languages are similar. They're very, very different, and the LogQL is optimized for simplicity and for ease for use. And LogQL, I would say that it's very non-trivial query language for logs. And LogSQL allows you querying all the matching rows, even if your LogSQL query queries all the billions of logs stored in VictoriaLogs, then this query will return you billion rows, unlike Elasticsearch, which has hard cut limit of 10,000 rows per each query. LogSQL also supports such features log streams. You can read about this feature on our documentation. This feature basically means that you can associate every actual log stream from different applications, from different instances of applications, with some set of static fields, labels, and then use these labels during queries in order to optimize the query performance and in order to group, slice and dice query results by these sets of labels. This concept is similar to log streams from Grafana Loki, but unlike the main difference is that VictoriaLogs has no issues with high cardinality of log streams compared to Grafana Loki. This means that you can ingest logs with fields, with high cardinality fields, which such as IP, user ID, or trace ID, and VictoriaLogs will happily consume this data, and this data will not lead to high cardinality issues such as high memory usage and high CPU usage, which are common in Grafana Loki. Here is the link for documentation for LogSQL. You can read it and familiarize yourself and feel how it works and impress yourself. The next feature is that VictoriaLogs has excellent integration with command line tools, with existing command line tools, which are usually used for logs analyzing, such as grep, JQ, less, head, tail, sort, and so on. You can just execute query in LogSQL via command line and pipe query results to any of these tools and build arbitrary complex pipes in the same way as you do when you analyze locally stored logs. And as I mentioned before, LogSQL returns all the matching rows. This means that you can run select star like query, which selects all the billions of rows from VictoriaLogs, and then process these logs in that client side with command line tools. And this doesn't kill VictoriaLogs, because in this case, VictoriaLogs spends resources, CPU time, and memory only when the reader pipe reads from this response stream, reads data from this response stream. If the reader stops reading this data, or reader closes the response connection, then VictoriaLogs instantly stops executing this query and stops using any resources, CPU, memory, for this query. So you can run just select star query in VictoriaLogs, and it will work. And it will return all the billions or trillions of logs if you need these logs. You can read more about this command line integration by the following link. I see the question. Let me answer the question right now, because I see the question from Harshit. Does it support analytical lab queries? Right now, LogSQL doesn't support analytical queries, but we are going to add support for analytical queries in the near future. you can read about this in our map for VictoriaLogs. So yes, in the near future, VictoriaLogs log scale query language in VictoriaLogs will support OLAP type queries, analytical queries, and statistical queries. So returning to our first impressions of VictoriaLogs, we created a benchmark suite for comparing resource usage between VictoriaLogs and Elasticsearch when they accept real logs. This benchmark suite uses a sample of real logs from this GitHub project. And it continuously sends these logs to VictoriaLogs and to Elasticsearch at the same time at the configured rate. And this benchmark measures resource usage such as CPU, memory, disk space simultaneously for VictoriaLogs and Elasticsearch under this data ingestion load. The benchmark is open sourced and it is available by the following link. So you can run it and reproduce benchmark results or tune it. The initial benchmark setup is we configured the data ingestion rate of 40,000 logs per second. We tried to increase this data ingestion rate can look quite low for some people who have very big production workloads for logs. But the bottleneck of this, we tried to increase the data ingestion rate more, but couldn't increase it reliably because of some bottleneck in components which were used in the benchmark. And this component is FileBit. It couldn't scale more. A single instance of FileBit couldn't process more than 4,000 logs per second. Probably we need to invest some time for lifting up this limitation in the future. So we run this benchmark with a constant data ingestion rate of 40,000 logs per second. These logs are ingested to VictoriaLogs and Elasticsearch at the same time, and we run this benchmark for more than 3 hours. So the total number of ingested rows was 500 million. Sorry, the next question is I need to build from NBS. I need to build 400,000 Docker images and what to expect logs, grab, get logs of it. Can connect Docker engines as plugin to VictoriaLogs. I'm not sure. Right now, VictoriaLogs, as I already said, supports commonly used log shippers such as FileBit, Logstash, FluentD, and Vector. As I know, Docker has integration with at least FileBit and Logstash, so you can use FileBit and Logstash for shipping these logs from Docker to VictoriaLogs. So returning to our benchmark, we ingested 500 million of logs at 40,000 logs per second ingestion rate. Let's look at resource usage. This graph shows CPU usage during this benchmark, and you can see that Elasticsearch uses around 1 CPU core during this benchmark, and VictoriaLogs uses 45% of a single CPU core. So VictoriaLogs is more than 2 times better in this case. Pretty exciting number. Let's look at the memory usage. So Elasticsearch uses around more than 4 gigabytes of memory during this benchmark, and VictoriaLogs uses 150 megabytes of RAM. Yeah, that's real. These real numbers. We checked it multiple times. So VictoriaMetrics is 28 times better than Elasticsearch. VictoriaLogs is 20 times better than Elasticsearch for memory usage. And the last result is this space. At the end of the benchmark, Elasticsearch used 55 gigabytes of disk space, and VictoriaLogs used only 4.3 gigabytes of disk space. So VictoriaLogs is 13 times better than Elasticsearch in this regard. This means that you can store 13 times more data to the same disk space when switching from Elasticsearch to VictoriaLogs. Let's look at the query performance over 500 millions of rows after the benchmark is finished. The first query is a typical query, just select all the logs with some keyword in these words, for instance, in this logs. For instance, we used the query which selects all the logs with SSH keyword. Unfortunately, Elasticsearch doesn't allow you selecting all these logs because the number of these logs is much bigger than 10,000, and Elasticsearch has hard cap limit of 10,000 results per each query. So we limited, we use this limit for both VictoriaLogs and Elasticsearch. And Elasticsearch returned 10K logs with SSH keyword from 500 million of logs in 190 milliseconds. And the query, you can look how the query was looking for Elasticsearch. You guess what results for VictoriaLogs? And VictoriaLogs performs this query faster in 45 milliseconds. This more than 4 times faster. And as you can look, the query used in VictoriaLogs is simpler, less verbose compared to the query used in OpenSearch. Let's look at a more complex query, which selects all the logs with some word and then filters logs, drops logs with some another word. For instance, the following query selects all the logs with word and removes logs from this set with info word. You can look that Elasticsearch performs this query in 519 milliseconds, and you can look how the query looks for Elasticsearch. And VictoriaLogs, it performs the query 3 times faster, and the query looks much simpler and much more easier to read and write compared to Elasticsearch query. And the last query which we tested is a more complex query which selects all the logs which contain some IP address, which is infrequently there are not so many logs with this particular IP address, and also this query adds additional filter on some word and additional filter to another word. And this Elasticsearch performs this query in 290 milliseconds, and VictoriaLogs performs this query in faster, in 180 milliseconds. And as you can look, the query also, the query for VictoriaLogs looks also easy to read and easy to write and easy to understand than the query for Elasticsearch. So let's return to the questions. What is the configuration of Elasticsearch and VictoriaMetrics in this benchmark? The default configuration. I mean that we run Docker images for Elasticsearch and VictoriaMetrics in this benchmark. You can look at the configuration in the benchmark project, which we open sourced. So we used the default configuration, and the only tuning we made for Elasticsearch is limiting memory usage, because by default, Elasticsearch uses almost all the available memory provided for on the host where it runs, even if it requires much less memory. So we had to tune the memory limit for Elasticsearch. So it runs smooth and still doesn't use all the available memory. As for could we expect Victoria traces? The next question. Yes, in the future. Let's make great VictoriaLogs and then return to Victoria traces. What machines were used to benchmark? We run this benchmark on local machine. This benchmark was running on one machine of our colleague, and as I remember, the number of CPU cores was around 16, and the amount of memory was around 32 gigabytes. But I'm not sure. I need to let's ask this question at the end of our session from the colleague who runs this benchmark. The next question, if they can make it fast and turn query and smaller on disk size, I'm waiting for, yeah, this is just comment. Okay. Let's look at how to optimize performance of typical log scale query. It is quite easy to make because VictoriaLogs is quite straightforward when executing log scale queries. It executes these queries from the left to right, like it is written. There is no any magic optimizations, and this gives you good control on how to optimize the query. Just put the most specific filters and the most lightweight filters in the front of the query. The most specific filter means that the filter which returns lower amounts of logs, much slower amounts of logs. For instance, if you look for logs from some user ID, then it is likely that it is better to put this filter on user ID in front of the query, because the number of logs from one user is usually much lower compared to the total amounts of logs, especially if you have a big number of users in your system. For example, let's look at the example. We used the same example which used for benchmark read performance. This example contains 3 words: IP address, some error word, and some pass. This query takes 180 seconds, as mentioned on the previous slide. Let's change the order. Let's put error in front of this query. Oh, the query performance is much not so good right now. It executes in more than 7 seconds. That's awful. Why? Because the error word is very frequent word which occurs very frequently in the sample of logs which are used in benchmark. This can significantly slow down query for log scale. And let's put the pass in front of this query, and the query performance improves over the initial query performance. And now it takes only 90 milliseconds, 2 times better than the initial performance, because this pass is very unique across all the ingested logs. It is more unique than the IP address. So as you can see, it is quite easy to optimize the query. Just put the most specific filters in front of query, and that's it. And all this, you can read about all these optimizations on the following link. So let's recap our benchmark results. VictoriaMetrics uses more than 2 times less CPU than Elasticsearch. VictoriaLogs uses hoping 28 times less memory than Elasticsearch. VictoriaLogs uses 13 times less disk space than Elasticsearch. And the query performance is usually better than Elasticsearch, especially if you pay attention for optimizing these queries. These benchmark results you can are reproducible. You can go to this link and run this benchmark on your hardware and see how it runs. So we published VictoriaLogs Preview version today, and it is ready for evaluation. Just go to our documentation for VictoriaLogs, follow this documentation, read, familiarize yourself with key concepts of VictoriaLogs, with LogsQL, with how to ingest data to VictoriaLogs, how to query this data. Try this on your production workloads and share impressions and results with us. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. We will wait for some time. Maybe some new comments will appear. And while we're waiting, let's check some few slides that left. So we will take part in some of conferences in the nearest future. So next week, there will be 2 concurrently running events. One in United States, Monitorama in Portland. There you can find Alex and ask him questions about VictoriaLogs or his plans or just how he's doing. And another will be in Berlin, Europe. It will be GopherCon. There you can find me and JJ and other folks who are from Europe. In September, we also will participate in StackConf in Berlin. And in November, meet us at KubeCon NA in Chicago. I'm really excited about this new KubeCon because the last KubeCon in Europe was like, it was crazy, 10,000 people. Yeah, the biggest conference probably I have ever visited. Okay, what else? We try to post interesting articles in our VictoriaMetrics blog. So since our last presentation, we got some new articles. So there is an article about logs that we are presenting today. Also a bit more dive in this never firing alerts stuff about VM alert. Also about integration with net data agents and blog post about Graphite query language. And maybe you didn't read all our articles. So with the blog post, maybe you'll find something interesting there. And also some recent news about VictoriaMetrics for this couple of months. I also encourage you to check them. One of the most cool articles from my perspective is about Roblox choosing VictoriaMetrics for the observability. It is very interesting, not only because it is Roblox, but also because of the numbers. So according to the article, Roblox is like monitoring 5 billion of active time series with VictoriaMetrics, and they're ingesting like 120 million samples per second in their installation. So this is quite insane numbers, and probably the highest numbers I have ever heard of in monitoring. Maybe Google has higher numbers, I don't know. So yeah, please visit, check it. We will really appreciate. And yeah, you see that such stories as about Roblox and also many, many other stories. This is something which helps us to build a better product, which gives us a feedback and also helps to spread the word about VictoriaMetrics and our solution. So if you have a good case study you want to share with, or your wins or your losses or your frustration with product, like I encourage you to contact us. And I don't know, you can you can even post an article without involvement from our side. Just say what you think about VictoriaMetrics. That would be also appreciated. And we constantly monitor internet for some mentions of our product, because we like to read such articles. They are also fun to read, always fun to read. And yeah, we have a couple of community channels where you can follow VictoriaMetrics to get latest news, like about this meetup that we are having it today. You can get notified about that in our Twitter, in our Slack channels, in our Telegram channels. Follow us on LinkedIn. Yes, stay tuned. Okay, so let's start our session. Let's check if there are any comments.
There is. Let's answer the question from our comments from Scott. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have any big customer news that you can share? Examples of big companies using it?
Let me cover that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's really pain point. The amount of customers that we can share is only the top of the iceberg, and it's extremely hard to get quotation, case study, customer interview from mostly all of them. We work on that. Some big names coming. Please stay tuned. Right now, I only can talk that's only public information you can find in our press release and on site.
Yeah, and I encourage you visiting our case studies, either on our documentation site or our official website, and reading some interesting case studies from big customers there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, here I have some questions regarding VictoriaLogs. So the first one, what about cluster version? So we released only single node version. What about cluster version?
Good question. Cluster version is in our roadmap, and we are going to release it in coming months.
Okay. What about the roadmap? Can you share it?
Yes, please share roadmap in our chat. It is the roadmap is located in documentation for VictoriaLogs, and you can go to the documentation. Roman, please share this, because I cannot share the information in this chat. Okay. So we have publicly available roadmap, and you can read it.
Yeah. The next question from my side will be like the answer, I believe, will be more broad than one sentence. Could you please tell me the difference in architecture between VictoriaMetrics and VictoriaLogs? What architectural gaps we covered? What it means for the community?
VictoriaLogs uses similar architecture as VictoriaMetrics. Uses the same basic principles, design principles, for achieving better performance and better compression rate. There are some differences which fix long-standing issues with VictoriaMetrics. The first difference is that VictoriaLogs stores indexes per each partition. As you probably know, VictoriaMetrics stores a global index across all the partitions. Global index in a separate directory, and partitions are stored in different directories, and this complicates moving these partitions between servers, because you cannot move only data partition. You need also index, and the index is global across all the partitions, and this complicates things. And VictoriaLogs fixes this issue. It stores indexes in the same directories as partitions, so you can freely move these partition directories from between different servers, make backups from these partitions, restores from these partitions, and it will work out of the box without additional tuning. And the next feature of VictoriaLogs, which is fixed compared to VictoriaMetrics, is related to high cardinality. VictoriaLogs also stores tracks active streams, active log streams. This the concept similar to active time series in VictoriaMetrics, and VictoriaMetrics needs to store mapping between time series metric name plus all the labels to internal time series ID in memory for active time series. And this amounts of memory can be quite big if you have quite big number of active time series. And VictoriaLogs fixes this issue by not storing this mapping in memory. It just uses hash calculations for this case. It uses wider internal IDs for streams internally.
Perfect. Let me interrupt you with a quick request from one of our users, I hope. Is Grafana data source plugin available?
Grafana data source. This question regarding VictoriaLogs or regarding VictoriaMetrics? As for VictoriaMetrics, then the Grafana data source plugin is available, and Roman can share the link to this plugin. As for data source plugin for VictoriaLogs, it isn't available yet, and we are going to cover this in the future. We have plans. Right now, VictoriaLogs provides its own web UI. It's pretty basic, but we are going to improve it over time.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions, and after that I will give Mike, if any other, to other folks. What about multi-tenancy? Does single node support multi-tenancy? Because
yes,
VictoriaMetrics single node doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's another feature of VictoriaMetrics, because VictoriaMetrics single node version of VictoriaMetrics doesn't support tenants, and cluster version of VictoriaMetrics supports tenants, and this means that it is impossible to just copy data from single node to cluster version of VictoriaMetrics, because they have different formats. And as for VictoriaLogs, we fixed this issue, and VictoriaLogs, single node of VictoriaLogs has the same data format as cluster version of VictoriaMetrics and of VictoriaLogs, and all these versions, single node and cluster version of VictoriaLogs, support multi-tenancy from the beginning.
Perfect. What else? I know that VictoriaLogs supports writing in the future. Unlikely to VictoriaMetrics. Yeah, that's really questionable about that, about the metrics versus logs. It's good that VictoriaLogs support that. It will be better if VictoriaMetrics will have this option as well, because forecasting is more applicable to the metrics, actually, by my experience. And the last question from my side regarding plans, what about S3 storage? Are you going to support it?
Yeah, there are such plans for adding support for storing data at object storage, such as S3, Minio, Google Cloud Storage, and so on. VictoriaLogs is ready for adding this storage. There are no any significant obstacles for implementing this support for object storage. So I think that we will implement it soon. The question is, any integration with syslog? Yes. Actually, the benchmark which we used uses syslog protocol for pushing data from the benchmark loader to FileBit, and then FileBit is set up for forwarding this data to VictoriaLogs and to Elasticsearch. So the answer is yes. You can use existing log shippers, which has integration with syslog. You can push data from syslog to these log shippers and set up these log shippers to push data to VictoriaLogs.
Thank you. Also, my couple words about that. So that was initial release of VictoriaLogs, and the most valuable thing that we definitely will appreciate, that's feedback. Please try, please run benchmarks against your production data, staging, any kind of the data. Please return to us with your feedback. Because based on this feedback, we definitely can improve the solution and provide more features, better features, even better performance, and be ready to suit your production. So that's request from myself and from the team.
Tom, and where users can leave their feedback?
Perfect. I will share the link for the community page on documentation, but feedbacks like any place where you can find it, but specific. GitHub, public Slack, public Telegram, write email to info@victoriametrics.com. Like any suitable for you for your way will be really appreciated.
And I would
Twitter.
say, yeah, I would add that it would be great if you could try command line integration with VictoriaLogs, with existing Unix tools such as grep, cut, and so on, because I believe this is a very undervaluated feature of not only VictoriaLogs but every system. And VictoriaLogs has excellent integration with command line tools, and I would recommend you trying it. And if you already use it, these command line tools for log analysis, then you will be impressed and will like this feature. And if you previously was using only web UIs for log analysis, for instance, Kibana or Grafana for Grafana logs, then also try command line, read the documentation about command line integration with VictoriaLogs, and try it. And I bet that you will love it better than web UI for log analysis.
I remember some news on Hacker News like 50 days ago, something like that, and there was the post of frustration of modern logging system, and there were like a big number of people complaining that modern logging system just doesn't work with these CLI tools that you mentioned. Like for me, it's something new because I don't know, I've got used to interfaces. I'm get used to click buttons with my mouse, but yeah, you're like representing older generation of programmers, and there are many people frustrated with this modern solution, and they want to have this integration with CLI tools. Yeah, so I guess those people will be happy with this new solution from VictoriaLogs.
Yeah, and from my side, that also I'm heavily relying on the user interfaces for the log. I was really surprised when you just can curl, forward that to less, and what you see on the screen just immediately load. And all new lines is just loaded when you request and not initially. And all pipes work really like a smooth. So really nice one. So yeah, please not underestimate the things.
Yeah. Also, maybe important stuff is support of alerting based on logs. Do you think it's possible?
Yes, I think that it's possible, and we definitely will implement it in future. Right now, we have no such capability, but we will implement it.
So could it be part of vmalert stuff?
I think that you should decide as the owner of vmalert. I think yes.
Well, yeah, I'm asking because now vmalert supports Prometheus, supports VictoriaMetrics, and Graphite. So there is already like 3 databases you can work with. Probably we can add support for logs as well there. It looks really similar.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Actually, also had this question. Regarding the vmagent, are we going to add any integration there, especially for the protocols? That's JSON line, Elastic, and I believe Prometheus.
Good question. I have no good answer to this question right now, because we need to think thoroughly whether it is better to integrate this new data ingestion protocols for logs into vmagent, or probably it is better to use existing log shippers or write our own log shipper, which will be named VLLogs from VMauth probably. Let's see.
Okay, that's definitely discussable. My input into have everything in one place, that you can send everything in one place. For example, OpenTelemetry. Fortunately, unfortunately, the protocol is not stable yet. But again, you can use one protocol for the shipping log metrics, maybe.
Yeah. Thanks
but
for
again,
mentioning OpenTelemetry, because Roman showed a slide.
You see, no one asked, so no one wants it.
Yes, our users ask us when we add support for OpenTelemetry for metrics, and we have pull request which has been created more than 1 year, which adds OpenTelemetry data ingestion protocol to VictoriaMetrics, and this open pull request didn't merge it yet because of some issues with OpenTelemetry support. The first issue was the initial issue was that the OpenTelemetry library provided by OpenTelemetry itself was very heavyweight and very complicated. When we added this tried adding this library to VictoriaMetrics, it increases the binary size of VictoriaMetrics twice. So just simple protocol, adding simple protocol word increases the binary size of VictoriaMetrics twice. That's unacceptable for us, because we pay special attention for binary size, as you know, and for performance. The second thing is the performance of default library for OpenTelemetry for metrics isn't good. It isn't optimized for performance. Also, it uses the protocol itself for metrics. The OpenTelemetry protocol for metrics itself is very unoptimized for network usage bandwidth. It transfers a lot of strange fields inside for every metric, and it uses bigger network bandwidth than any other existing protocols for metric transfer. That's also strange. And right now, we decided that it is better to write our own implementation for this OpenTelemetry metrics protocol. We wrote it, and it is waiting to be merged into VictoriaMetrics soon. But overall, we are not satisfied with the current state of metrics support in OpenTelemetry. It is not good.
Okay, thank you. That was a question from Dima about what integration. Let me show it. What integration will be with VictoriaMetrics? Dima, is it VictoriaMetrics or VictoriaLogs?
I think that the question is how VictoriaLogs will be integrated with VictoriaMetrics.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think that the main point of integration could be stream labels, log stream labels. Prometheus advertises, and VictoriaMetrics advertises, encourages users to use job and instance labels in every metric. the job label identifies the application, and the instance label identifies the instance of this application. If we will encourage users to use the same instance and job labels at VictoriaLogs for streams, for marking streams in log streams in VictoriaLogs, then we can use these labels to find logs associated with metrics and vice versa. I think that's a way to go for integration between logs and metrics.
Sounds great. Like from my experience, you have alerts, something like service, control plane, experience some error, and you definitely want to check the logs from this service, better from this instance for particular time window to analyze what was wrong. That if that would be done as one button, that would be awesome. But again, yeah, that's definitely not a simple task, and we need to somehow to cover it in the future. Any other questions?
Okay, so let's conclude it. I see no questions, but again, you can ask them afterwards if you even watch this meetup in recording on YouTube. Just leave a comment with a question or ask your questions later in our public channels. We read them, we follow them, we check every day what happens. And yeah, we appreciate for all of you being here with us. And yeah, stay tuned for the next meetup in the next couple of months. Try to meet us on the conferences. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.